All right. Good evening, everyone. Let us begin. So, Emirtz Hashem. First of all, welcome back from our little break from last week, and thank you to everyone for braving the elements. Emirtz Hashem and coming out for tonight's shiur. I want to just do something a little bit different. That whereas I know each and every week we try to focus primarily on Sefer Tehillim and go ahead and tie it into the parsha. Given the fact that this is women's shiur, and given the fact that this parsha is Chayei Sarah, and of course the death and life of Sarah Imenu plays such a profound and prominent role, so I'd like to spend really this shiur a bit more focused on the parsha. And actually, interestingly enough, what we will see in Emirtz Hashem is that from some of the yisodos, some of the fundamental ideas which we glean from this week's shiur, from this parsha, will Emirtz Hashem inform our discussions in the weeks ahead on the kapitla of Tehillim that we're going to focus on. So let's begin with the opening pasuk from the parsha. Vayu Chayei Sarah, Mea Shana ve'esim Shana ve'sheva Shanim, Shnei Chayei Sarah. The Torah tells us, on one hand, a very simple statement. These are the years of the life of Sarah, 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years, the years of the life of Sarah. So there are many different questions that come down on this pasuk, right? On the most basic level, the first question. Right, in other words, why the years divided up? Just tell us that she lived 127 years. Why 100 years? Why 20 years? Why 7 years? That's question number one. Question number two, which is the last phrase in the pasuk itself, Shnei Chayei Sarah, these are the years of Sarah Imenu's life, seems to be a redundant and unnecessary phrase. So Rashi HaKadosh addresses both of these issues. Rashi says in number two, Vayu Chayei Sarah, Mea Shana ve'esim Shana ve'sheva Shanim, Lekach nichtav Shana b'chol klal uklal. Lomar lecha shekol echad nedrash liatzmo. So Rashi says something very interesting. Rashi says the Torah is coming to teach us a little bit about the essence of Sarah Imenu's life. You know, it's interesting if you think about it. Some of the people who are the most profound, important, and seminal figures within our people's history, we don't know that much about. If you think about it for just a moment, right? How much do we really know about Sarah Imenu? So if you think about it again, what do we know about Sarah Imenu? Right? We're introduced to her when? At the end of Parashas Noach, when we're told that she relocates, right, with Avram. That's when we're first introduced to her. The truth is, most of what we learn about Sarah Imenu is passive. Right? We learn about the episode, she's taken captive twice, once by Paro, once by Avimelech. The only time where we see Sarah doing something active is really, again, all in the same context. The context of where she advises Avram to take Hagar as a wife when she herself is unable to conceive. Then ultimately, again, getting rid of Hagar the first time, and then expelling Hagar with Yishmael the third time after the birth of Yitzchak. One more time where we see Sarah Imenu laughing when she hears HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell Avram Avinu that you're going to have a child. If you think about all that you put together, so pretty much like you could count on one hand the number of things that the Torah Kedosha tells us about Sarah Imenu, which is so interesting and intriguing, because Sarah Imenu is one of the most important people in our people's history, right? She's the first of the Imos. She's the first of the matriarchs. She left an imprint that is felt to this very day upon Klal Yisrael. And if you think about it, how much do we really know about her? So according to Rashi, what's fascinating is this pasuk is not just simply telling us that Sarah Imenu died and she was 127 years old. Torah is also conveying to us important information about who Sarah was. And ultimately, again, Rashi says, that's why it breaks it up, 120 and 7. Rashi says in the second line, Bas mea ke bas esrim lechet, ma bas esrim lochata, shere'ena bas onjin. When she was 100, she was like 20 when it comes to sin. Now, what does that mean? So the Gemara brings down that a person is not held responsible for their sinful activity below the age of 20, which is good. So anyone here is below the age of 20, take advantage, right? But no, I'm just kidding. Hey, so the ideal over here is something very interesting. You're not held, so the same way that when she was younger than 20, she was quote unquote sin-free, even when she reached the age of 100, she was still sin-free. And then Rashi goes on. Rashi says, and bas esrim kebas sheva yofi. That's very interesting. And when she was 20, she was like 7 in terms of beauty, which is actually very interesting because the truth is, one would have thought just the opposite, right? Bepashtos, a woman at 20 possesses beauty that she doesn't have when she's 7. Right? 7 is a child, 20 already is womanhood. The Maharal says something so beautiful. The Maharal in Gur Aryeh comments on this and he explains that the same way that a 7-year-old has a beauty that's innocent, has a beauty that's not tainted by any of the realities of the world, Sarah Imenu retained that innocent beauty throughout her entire life. So therefore, according to Rashi, what's unfolding over here is the Torah telling us, giving us a little bit of a window, not simply into Sarah's death, but who Sarah was throughout her lifetime. Okay, so that's addressing why it's broken up into 127. What about the last piece? Why does that, if you go back to number 1 for just a moment, why do you need that phrase, Shnei Chayei Sarah? These are the years of Sarah Imenu's life. And here, Rashi says again, last line in number 2, an incredible statement, Shnei Chayei Sarah, Kulon Shavin L'tova. All of Sarah Imenu's years were good. Kulon Shavin L'tova. Now, if I were to ask you, what doesn't that statement mean? I know that's an open-ended question, right? What doesn't that statement mean? In other words, let me say it differently. When you read that statement, Kul Shav, that they were all good. What does that sound like? They were all good. What does that mean? They were all good. Positive attitude. Good. Excellent. Good. Any other suggestions? No averos. So it's interesting because that's often the reflexive understanding. But we know, as tempting as that sounds, is that possible to be true? No. In fact, again, remember, I want to point out, there is a Ramban, for example, that was highly critical of Sarah Imenu's behavior in the way that she mistreated Hagar. So the Ramban holds that Sarah Imenu, when she first exiles Hagar from the home, the Ramban says Sarah Imenu mistreated Hagar. And the Ramban goes so far to say that because Sarah Imenu mistreated Hagar, therefore, the descendants of Hagar hate the descendants of Sarah to this very day. Just today, there was another terror attack in Eretz Yisrael which claimed 3 lives. The animosity between the children of Hagar and between the children of Sarah exists to this very day. Where does that animosity come from? The Ramban says it comes from Sarah Imenu's mistreatment of Hagar. So to say that Sarah Imenu was blameless, was sin-free, not true. First of all, no one is sin-free. No, it's as Shalom says, "Ein tzadik ba'aretz asher lo yechta." Even the most righteous of people do something wrong. So, right? In other words, the Torah goes out of its way to tell us that Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock no less than 4 times. You think to yourself, give the man a break. Give the man a break. He committed 1 avera in his entire life. Why do you have to beat a dead horse? Why do you have to keep saying it? It's to impress upon us a very simple idea. Even Moshe Rabbeinu makes mistakes. And that's what makes Moshe Rabbeinu human. There's no such thing as a human being who doesn't make mistakes. So what does Kulan Shavin L'tova? All of the years, so according to Rashi, Shnei Chayei Sarah, all of her years were good. So I want to share with you 2 interpretations of this that I think are quite amazing. I'm going to go a little bit out of order. If you take a look at number 4, this is from an essay by Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik, again, it's actually a beautiful, beautiful essay titled The Covenantal Role of Sarah. The Rav had 2 essays, one about Avram Avinu, and one about Sarah Imenu. And in this, if you look at the title over here, he writes, "What was Sarah like?" What was Sarah like? And again, it's interesting, and I urge you to go back and think about this, that who was Sarah Imenu? And I just want to point out again that if you open up the Chumash and you go through the text, you don't necessarily get a complete picture as to who Sarah Imenu really was. There are bits and pieces. There are some episodes here and there, but it does not seem to paint for us a complete portrait. So Rabbi Soloveitchik is intrigued by this. Who was Sarah Imenu? And again, not that I'm going to get a whole biographical sketch, but at the end of the day, what was the dominant quality of Sarah Imenu? And Rabbi Soloveitchik says something so beautiful over here. If you look on the left-hand paragraph, all the way at the end, about 4 lines up from the bottom, he quotes over here, Rashi, Kulan Shavin Latova. They were all for good. All of Sarah's years were good. Look at this. Rashi is suggesting, this is so beautiful, 3 divisions of life. Childhood, youth, and adulthood on the right-hand column need not be mutually exclusive. Now, what Rabbi Soloveitchik is doing over here is he's blending the 2 parts of Rashi. Right? Rashi first comments on Mea Shana, as right, Mea Shana, Esrim Shana, the Sheva Shanim. 100 years, 20 years, 7 years. So remember, Rashi broke the Torah breaks down. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, what's 120 and 7? Different stages of life. Different stages of life, right? Ultimately, again, we'll call, working backwards, 7 is childhood. 7 is childhood. 20 is youth. And ultimately, again, 100 represents adulthood. 3 different stages in life. And Rabbi Soloveitchik says something absolutely amazing. When people age, not that anyone here knows anything about that, right? But maybe you have a friend who's aging, right? So people age. What usually happens as people age? They usually go from one stage to another and assume that once, in other words, as now I start a new stage, the previous stage is over. So I was a child, now I'm transitioning from childhood into youth, into young adulthood. My childhood is over, my youth has begun. Now my youth is over, ultimately again, adulthood has begun. Rabbi Soloveitchik says something amazing. He says, it doesn't have to be that way. And in fact, that's not the ideal way to live, to transition from stage to stage. Instead, how should one live? And this is incredible. One could retain, the right-hand paragraph, one could retain the positive strength of past stages, even as we progress in life. The charismatic covenantal personality, indeed, this is the mark of true greatness, is able to absorb, to experience the qualities of 3 periods simultaneously. The child is in, so again, before we go on, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, do you know what it means to lead a successful life? It's the ability not to go from stage to stage and leave each stage behind you. It's to go from stage to stage and to take each stage with you. So what does this mean? This is so beautiful. The child is endowed with a capacity of all-absorbing faith and trustfulness. Youth bursts with zealousness, idealism, and optimism. The adult, mellowed with years, has the benefit of accumulated knowledge and dispassionate judgment. To me, these lines are so incredibly profound. Rabbi Soloveitchik is describing the 3 different stages in life. Again, what does a child have? Right? A child ultimately, again, has trust. Right? The child sees the world in such a simple and beautiful way, trusting that all is good around him or her. What does youth have? Optimism, idealism, a zrizus, a zealousness, right? I can do anything, accomplish everything. And then what happens? What does adulthood have? Adulthood has dispassionate judgment. The ability to kind of see things for what they are, to not make rash decisions, and the ability to think things through. Writes Rabbi Soloveitchik, each age is physically and psychologically attuned to particular emphasis, but the superior individual can retain and harmonize the positive strengths of all 3 periods during his entire lifetime. Listen to how profound this is. Right? What does it mean to live a successful life? Living a successful life is when you could simultaneously be a child, right? A youth, and an adult. It's when you could simultaneously harness all of these powers within you at the same time. Rabbi Soloveitchik writes, Sarah was such a person. The goodness of her life was equally distributed. Kulam shavin letova. The Rav says this is what Rashi means. When the pasuk says Shnei Chayei Sarah, these were the years of Sarah's life. And Rashi adds in his comment, Kulan shavin letova. They were all good. Rabbi Soloveitchik wants to suggest that what Rashi is saying is that Sarah Imenu was able to take each and every stage with her in the progression of life. She was at the same time a child in her total faith, youthful in her exuberant idealism, and an adult in the maturity of her judgment. What a beautiful idea. This was the tribute Abraham bestowed on Sarah. So you want to know who Sarah Imenu was? Sarah Imenu was a person who was simultaneously able to be a child, a young adult, and a mature adult, all at the same time. And by the way, if you think about this, you see this in Sarah's life. Where do you see her childlike qualities? Where do you see her childlike qualities? When she, right? Well, good, when she laughed, that's also beautiful. That maybe just the innocent laughter of like a child's laughter, beautiful. Even earlier, she follows Avram. Right? Imagine for a moment your husband comes home one day and says, listen, God spoke to me. God spoke to me. Good news. Pack up. We're going. We're going, right? Where? I don't know. God didn't tell me that piece of information. Right? So can you, again, just think about how you would, no matter how pious you think your husband might be. Right? Imagine, I think most people, and again, most rational people would say, you know what, maybe you haven't eaten in a while. You should relax a little bit. Take a day off tomorrow. Maybe we need a vacation before you go. In other words, what is Sarah? Avram comes home. He says, God spoke to me. He told me Lech Lecha. And what does Sarah Imenu say? What does she say? Wait, when are we leaving? When are we leaving? That's a child's trust. That's a child's trust, right? A child has a trust in a parent that is not a rational trust. It's an irrational trust that only a young child can have. Sarah Imenu has that level of trust and innocence. But she's also a young adult, right? A young adult in what she has ridiculous idealism. Where do we see Sarah Imenu's ridiculous idealism? When she tells Abraham to take Hagar. See, you have to understand something. When Abraham and Sarah didn't have children, what was Abraham's plan regarding their infertility? What was his plan? No. He didn't have a plan. In other words, Sarah's my wife. I love her. This is it. So if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to give us children, then, again, we understand Abraham and Sarah were a profound power couple. And just to understand the profundity of their interconnectedness is after Sarah Imenu dies, what does Avraham Avinu accomplish? Nothing. Right? I shouldn't say nothing. He marries off Yitzchak. That's this week's parasha, right? Because remember again, Sarah Imenu dies at the beginning of this week's parasha. A good part of the parasha is Avram sending Eliezer to find a wife for Yitzchak. And then, by the way, what happens afterwards? Avram dies. It sounds like the Torah tells us he marries again, has a few more kids, right? And then he dies. The dynamic activity of Avram Avinu comes to a close with the death of Sarah Imenu. So Avram didn't have a plan for infertility. The plan was, this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. This is what it is. I'm content with you. And, Rabbi Soloveitchik, again, has a beautiful essay. He has essays on marriage. And one of the things that the Rav writes about, that you learn from Sarah Imenu and Avram Avinu, is that we often think of marriage as a vehicle for procreation. But the Rav says that there's also a concept of marriage as a vehicle for companionship. Even if it doesn't create procreation, the companionship itself is a profound aspect of the relationship. And Rabbi Soloveitchik, where do you see that from? From Avram and Sarah. You're right? It's interesting. You don't see this dynamic by other couples. You see it by Avram and Sarah. That Avram Avinu knows they're old people. They're old people. Barring a miracle, he's not going to have children with Sarah. He never says to Sarah, maybe I should marry someone else. This is it. I love my wife. I'm content with this life. This is it. Sarah, in her youthful idealism, says, you need to take another wife. You need to take another wife. Because there needs to be a future. What we are building cannot end with us. And if I can't give you a child, then you need to marry someone else who can. Not only that, but Sarah says, and this is incredible, Sarah says to Avram, in biblical relationships, there are two different types of relationships. There's marriage. A man could take a woman as a wife or as a concubine. As a concubine. So a concubine is a lower level of marriage. Sarah says to Avram, don't take Hagar as a pilagesh, as a concubine. No, marry her. Marry her. It should be legit, right? It should be proper. If this woman is going to bear you a child, and this child is going to be the future of your monotheistic enterprise, it has to be done. Kidas Sukkot, it should be correct. Ridiculous idealism. Sarah Imenu is so committed to their life's work, to their life's mission, that she tells her husband, go ahead and marry another woman. Okay, where do we see Sarah Imenu's mature, dispassionate judgment? Remember, Sarah has to tell her husband to do something very difficult, which is to expel Yishmael from the home. Avram Avinu is very resistant. HaKadosh Baruch Hu intervenes. And what does Hashem tell Avram Avinu? Right, it's amazing. Women always get that question right? Incredible. Kol asher tamar elecha Sarah shma bikola. Whatever Sarah Imenu tells you, listen. Wow. You know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, Avram Avinu? Your wife is a wise woman. You can't make a dispassionate decision over here because this is your son. She can. And you have to listen. Whatever she tells you to do is what you need to do. So isn't it incredible? Do you want to know the great challenge in life, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, is you know what happens? We stop being children. Right? We leave childhood, we become young adults, and we forever close the door on our childhood. And then when we go from young adulthood to mature adulthood, we go ahead and close the door on young adulthood. Now I'm a mature adult. That's not how the Jew lives. Sarah Imenu teaches us the goal is to take elements of each stage with you along your journey in life. So never lose an element of the trustfulness of your childhood. And never lose the excitement, the zealousness, the eagerness, the optimism, the hope of your young adulthood. And make sure to always keep a piece of the dispassionate judgment of your mature adulthood with you every single step of the way. Herein lies the greatness of Sarah Imenu. Shnei Chayei Sarah Kulan Shavin L'Tova. All of the years were of incredible, equal, beautiful goodness. To me, I've always found this piece to just be so incredible, so overwhelming. And this is what we look to for Sarah Imenu. This is the legacy that Sarah Imenu teaches us. There are other examples of this. Everybody likes to speak about aging gracefully. It's a big thing now. We should age gracefully. So people think that aging gracefully is offered a reference to how you look. Right? I want to age gracefully, right? So I don't know what that means. Less wrinkles, more, whatever it means. For a Jew, aging gracefully means I don't close the door on any particular stage of life. I take the beautiful elements of each of them with me as I go into the next. That's how the Jew ages gracefully. That's the years of Sarah Imenu's life. Take a look at number 3. That's the first approach. First approach is beautiful. I want to share with you now something that is, I saw this Al-Sheikh and I was absolutely blown away by it. So go back up to number 3 for just a moment. Get ready for this. So the Al-Sheikh writes, Achine yadanu mechachmei ha'emes. So the Al-Sheikh himself was a more Kabbalistically oriented commentary. So in 3 Aleph, he says something amazing. Hine yadanu mechachmei ha'emes. It is known from the Chachmei Emes, the sages who know the truth, whoever that is. Ki Avram v'Sara, listen to this, Bo'u l'takin eis asher ifsu adam v'chaba. Avram and Sarah came to atone for the sin of Adam and Chava. Listen to this. V'chein nira medivra b'seinu zal ba'omrim b'reishis rabba, lama lo nivra Avram tchila. Why wasn't Avram created as the first human being? Mipnei shema shekilkel Adam ba'Avram v'tikein. V'im haya nivrahu tchila mi yitakein acharav kihine letakein ba'Avram. So this is incredible. So again, the Al-Sheikh quoting from the Zohar, telling us this idea, Avram and Sarah, their mission was to atone for the mistake of Adam and Chava. Get ready for this. V'hu, ki Adam v'Chava. I'm now in source number 3, paragraph Aleph, 4 lines in. Ki Adam v'Chava heviu misli olam. Adam and Chava, because of their actions, brought death to the world. V'Avram v'Sara heviu chayim la'olam. Avram and Sarah brought life to the world. Right? How did Avram and Sarah bring life to the world? By introducing HaKadosh Baruch Hu to mankind, they brought life to the world. So Adam and Chava brought death, Avram and Sarah brought life. Eilu garma klala, ve'eilu v'nivrecha b'cha. Adam and Chava brought klala, brought curses upon the earth. Avram and Sarah brought blessing. Adam silik shchina l'rakiyah. Adam and Chava's actions caused HaKadosh Baruch Hu to retreat from the earth into the celestial sphere. The Avram and Sarah horidu merakia shvi. What did Avram and Sarah do? They brought down the Shechina from the heavens into the earth. Goes on. Eilu kilkulu anefesh ve'eilu asu anefesh. So what happened? So again, so Adam and Chava, through their actions, they went ahead and they tarnished the soul. Avram and Sarah brought so many souls back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Eilu achlu ve'echilu mashmevi misala olam. Adam and Chava ate what they weren't supposed to, and as a result, ultimately brought death to the world. Ve'eilu achlu ve'echilu mashmevi chayim li'olam. What did Avram and Sarah do? Avram and Sarah ultimately went ahead and fed people. And by feeding people, it's incredible. Right? Adam and Chava used food to drive a wedge between themselves and God. Avram and Sarah used food to bring people closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he says something amazing. He says, okay, so in paragraph base he goes on. So I want to point out something that's really fascinating over here, which is that the Alshich paints this picture that of the life of Sarah Imenu, that Sarah was always living in these two spheres, or these two dimensions. On one hand, there was an incredible part of her life that was focused on atoning for the past. Not even her misdeeds, but the misdeeds again of the first woman, of Chava, right? And then there was another part of her life that was focused ultimately on building a future. An incredible dichotomy. A woman focused on atoning for the past and ultimately simultaneously building the future. Now, pause this for just a moment. And I want to contrast this with someone amazing from last week's parasha. If you turn the page, we're going to go back to last week's parasha for just a moment. The Torah says we're going back now to the story of Lot and Stone. Another fascinating, really riveting story. So the Torah says, number 5, Vayikol tziav ol samachutza, vayomer himaleit al nafshecha, al tabit acharecha, val tamo b'chal akikar hahara himaleit pentis safa. So remember again, just to frame the story, Lot and his family are being saved from the destruction of Stone. The Malach comes, and ultimately goes in and tells Lot, his wife, remember the Medrash tells us the name of Lot's wife was Iris. Ayin Yud Resh Yud Sof. Iris. So the Malach tells Lot, Iris, and the 2 daughters who are escaping with them, go, run away, but whatever you do, al tabet acharecha. Do not look back. Do not look back. Okay, skip for just a moment to number 7. What happens? V'tabet ishto me'acharav v'tehi netziv melach. Iris looks back, and what happens? She becomes a pillar of salt. So there's a couple of questions you have to analyze over here. Question number 1 is why can't they look back? Question number 2 is why does Iris, upon looking back, become a pillar of salt? So Rashi says over number 6 something very interesting. Sorry for going out of order. Rashi says, Atabet acharecha, ata hirshato imohem, ubischus avram atanitzol, eincho kidai liros beparnosam va'atanitzol. So Rashi says on a very simple level, you don't have a right to look at their destruction. In other words, what the Malach was telling them is really Lot, Iris, daughters, you should be destroyed with the rest of Stone. Remember again, Lot was righteous. Lot was righteous in comparison to the people of Stone. But was Lot objectively righteous? Was he objectively righteous? No. How do we know that he wasn't objectively righteous? You remember the episode, right, where Lot is entertaining the Malachim in his home. He didn't yet realize that they're malachim. What happens? The people of Sodom surround the house, right? And they say to Lot, send out your guests to us. What does Lot say? Remember, what does Lot say? Right? Leave my guests alone. Here, I have 2 unmarried daughters. Take them, do what you want. What? What are you talking about? What does that even mean? So you're willing to sacrifice your 2 daughters to safeguard hachnasas orachim of strangers? See, that's what Sodom does. Sodom warps everything. It warps everything. So Lot, remember, so this was the guy who was willing to give up his 2 daughters to some angry mob outside of his house. So the Malach says, don't look back. You have no right to see the destruction of your landsman. You have no right to look at the destruction of Sodom, because you are just as culpable. You are just as guilty as they were. The only reason you're being saved is because of your uncle, because of Avram Avinu. Therefore, you have no right to look back. Iris looks back. She turns into a pillar of salt. Why does she turn into a pillar of salt? So we're familiar with the famous Rashi. Number 8, Rashi says, "Vatinitziv melach, b'melech chata." She sinned with salt. How did she? B'melech laksa. Amra lo t'nima at melach lo archim alalu. Amra lo afa minak hara ze atama lahani makom hazeh. So again, Rashi quotes the Medrash. The Medrash says that when Lot brought home the guests, he served them some bread. He asked Iris for some salt, and she went ballistic on him. Right? It's bad enough that you go out and you bring home guests. It's bad enough that you have this halach nasas archim thing. Now you want me to feed them, and it's not enough to feed them. Now you want to give me salt. So Rashi Medrash quotes over here that because she was reticent to give salt, therefore she turns into a pillar of salt. Okay, so this is the conventional understanding of Rashi. But let's try to look at this a little bit deeper. Let's try to understand. See, because what's the one unanswered question in all of this? So now I know why they can't look back. All right? I know according to Rashi now, again, why she turned into a pillar of salt. What question remains unanswered? Why did Iris look back? At the end of the day, why did she look back? In other words, you know Sodom is being destroyed. You know that you're being saved even though you don't deserve to be saved. You're given one simple instruction. Well, it's funny how like so many of the stories of the Torah are the same. It's the same story. People given one simple instruction and unable or unwilling to comply with one simple instruction. Adam, Chava, don't eat that fruit. Iris, don't look back. And there's multiple other. So why does she look back? So the Medrash writes in number 9, something very moving. The Medrash writes, Nichmaru rachameha al benoseh hanesuos. So remember again, there's another part of the story. So Lot and Iris had 4 daughters. 2 of them were married, 2 of them were unmarried. Lot tries to convince his sons-in-law and his daughters to flee with them. So the Torah says, "Vahi be'enov kimitzachek." They didn't take him seriously. So according to the Medrash, what happens? Iris, and it's truly heartbreaking, Iris is escaping Sodom with only 2 of her daughters, with her 2 unmarried daughters who were at home. So why does she look back? Why does she look back? Writes the Perkei Rabbi Elazar, number 9. Ve'bita achareha lir osim holchos achareha. Why did she look back? Because she was hoping maybe last minute my married daughters are coming. She was a mother. And she was simply looking back to see if her children were in tow. Are my daughters, did they finally get their senses about them? Did they decide to follow? So again, it's a heartbreaking reason why she's looking back, but she still, again, was in defiance of the directive of the Malach. So, okay, that's one approach. I want to share with you something a little bit different. Take a look at number 10. The Gemara Maseches Yuma says something like this. The Gemara says, Herhure Avera, Kashume Avera, which is a fascinating statement. Literally translated, thoughts of sin are even more intense or more severe than sin itself. Which at first glance doesn't make all that much sense. Remember, does HaKadosh Baruch Hu hold us accountable for sinful thoughts? That's a good question. Right? Baruch Hashem, the answer to that is no. Otherwise, some of us would be in an incredible amount of trouble. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't normally hold us accountable for sinful thoughts. So if that's the case, there are exceptions like idolatry, other things like that. But Lamaisa, why does the Gemara say that thoughts of Aveira are even worse than the action of an Aveira itself? So of course, on a basic level, one can make the argument that, you see, when I do a Maisa Aveira, when I do an action of an Aveira, the advantage is I know I've done something wrong. So if I know that I've done something wrong, then I have the ability, hopefully, to rectify it. When a person is steeped in inappropriate thoughts, it's easy to justify that by just saying, it's just thoughts. I haven't done anything. So because I haven't done anything, therefore, again, there's nothing to rectify. And therefore, a person could end up struggling with that throughout an entire lifetime. But comes along the Chazon Ish, and the Chazon Ish number 11 says something absolutely astounding. He writes, Koi al hirhurim shela acher ha'avera. This is incredible. The Chazon Ish says, when the Gemara says, Hirhure Aveira kasha me'aveira, thoughts of sin are even more severe than the sin itself. The Chazon Ish says, which thoughts of sin are we talking about? He's talking about preoccupation with the fact that I've done something wrong after I've committed the wrong. Right? We know this, because we've all experienced this. I commit an Aveira, so I've done the action. What often happens after I sin? What happens? What happens? Guilt. Guilt. And by the way, having a feeling of guilt is a good thing. That means that my neshama is sensitive to sin, right? When there's no guilt, that's actually scary. That means that I'm even in a greater state of disrepair than I even realized. So the Chazon Ish says something amazing. He says, Hirhure avera kashem aver, thoughts of sin are even more severe than the sin itself. The Chazon Ish posits refers to the guilty feelings after I sin. Get ready for this. Lachshov machshavas yeyosh. Because says the Chazon Ish, sometimes I'm so overwhelmed by guilt that I'm just simply ready to give up. I feel so badly about myself. I feel so down on myself. I feel like I've failed so profoundly that I'm literally ready to throw in the towel. So it says the Chazon Ish. That's what it means. Sometimes, this is incredible, the guilt that you feel, the feelings, the thoughts of guilt after the sin, sometimes are more debilitating than the actual Aveira itself. I sinned. Okay, we all make mistakes. But then that guilt, if we all experience guilt in different ways, that guilt could be paralyzing. That guilt could be overwhelming. And that guilt could literally be so powerful that it causes a person to give up on life. And the Chazon Ish says, V'arotze linotzel mizah, I'm sorry, that's a typo. V'arotze linotzel mizah, if someone wants to be saved from these feelings of guilt, what should you do? This is incredible. Yosim kol machshavto rak ba'asid lahamshich b'derech ha'avoda. What do you need to do sometimes if you need to save yourself from guilt? What do you have to do? Stop thinking about the past and focus on the future. The Chazon Ish says sometimes when you feel that you're about to lose yourself in the guilt of your transgressions, if you feel that you're about to lose yourself in the guilt of your misdeeds, if I know I didn't Aveira, I feel so guilty, I feel so bad about it, and I feel the life paralysis setting in, says the Chazon Ish, stop thinking about it and just move yourself forward in life. And says the Divrei Shmuel something absolutely amazing. Now we understand what's happening in Stone. The Malach says to Lot and his family, you are being saved. Brand new beginning. Brand new start. But in order to fully actualize the new start, there's only one condition. What's the condition? Don't look back. Don't look back. What does it mean, don't look back? Says the Divrei Shmuel in number 12. Al tabeit acharecha, don't look back. Al hanefilos shahayulach. Don't look at your past failures. Don't look at your past failures. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, the Malach says, to Iris, to Lot, to the girls, you're being given the greatest gift in the world. What's the greatest gift? The greatest gift? A new start. A new beginning. But the only way for you to take advantage of that new beginning is al tabeit acharecha. You can't look back. You can't look back. You have to look forward. You have to look forward. But what about the failures of the past? What about all the misdeeds of the past? What about all the missteps of the past? What about all the things that went so terribly wrong? Got it? Understood? You got to leave it back in stone. And if you want to embrace this beautiful new future in front of you, you just have to look forward. The mistake, ultimately, again, that Iris made is that she was being given a fresh start, a new beginning, but it required a disciplined look forward. Iris couldn't do it. Iris could not disassociate herself from the failures of the past. She could not disassociate again from the nephilos, from the failures of the past, and therefore she turns into a pillar of salt. By the way, what's salt? What's salt? Salt is a preservative. What salt does is it preserves things in their current state. And that thing that is preserved remains in that state. It could be forever. It could be forever. Why does Iris turn into a pillar of salt? Because it represented her inability to move herself forward by stopping to look backwards. And it's such an incredible insight into this story. You're being given a new beginning, a fresh start. But the only way for you to actualize that is stop looking at what's behind you. Stop looking at what's behind you and focus solely on what's in front of you. Iris can't do it. And when you can't stop looking at your past, what you become is a pillar of preservative. What you become is a pillar of salt, forever preserved in where you are, unable to go ahead and move yourself forward. You know, the mashal, I've quoted this many times in the past, one of my favorite mashalim. The Bera Parsha, he brings down this beautiful idea. He says, if you could imagine, somebody's driving, and the person says, you know, when I drive, all I do is I look in the rear view mirror. That's all I do. The whole time I'm driving, I just drive, I just look in the rear view mirror. Right? You would hear then you say, that's ridiculous. Right? All you do is you look in the rear view mirror, you're going to get into an accident. Right? What do you have to do when you drive? You have to look ahead. You have to look ahead. You want to get from point A to point B. If all you're doing is looking in the rear view mirror, you're not going anywhere. But if you look ahead, then there's no telling what you could accomplish, where you can go. So this was Iris. So what we see from this particular episode is this concept. And this, I think, is one of the most difficult things in life, where sometimes I know that I have a past that's really broken. Or I shouldn't say it's really broken. I know that I have a past that has broken stuff in it. And so human nature is often like, I can't move myself forward until I fix everything in my past, right? Doesn't that make sense? I should first take care of everything in the past so I can move forward. So essentially, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us is, good luck with that, right? Because there's almost no one who could repair everything in their past. There's going to be some stuff that is broken and is going to remain broken. And what I have to learn is the art of not looking back. I have to learn the art of kind of sometimes letting the past be the past, recognizing that some parts of it are painful, some parts of it are difficult, some parts have left me bruised and battered, but you know what? What's done is done. What's done is done. And there's nothing I can do to fix that, to alter that, to change that. And therefore, again, the only advice I could find for myself is, al tabeit acharecha. Stop looking back and just simply focus on looking forward. That's the message of Iris. But then comes Sarah Imenu, And Sarah says, but 1 second. But 1 second. You can't not look at the past at all. Right? Remember again, even if we go back to our driving mashal, while it's true that you are supposed to go ahead and look forward, right? There's a reason why the rear view mirror is there, right? Why is the rear view mirror there? It's an important good piece of driver's ed 101, right? Why is the rear view mirror there, right? What role does the rear view mirror play? I'm sorry, because somebody's too close behind me. Good. Why else? You have to. Everybody here is Amish. You drive a horse and buggy. No one uses rear view mirror for it. In other words, remember the biggest reason you need a rear view mirror is if you want to change lanes, right? If you want to change lanes, and which happens all the time in life, right? You need to check what's happening around you, right? See, sometimes in life I have to pivot, and the only way to know when to pivot, how to pivot, where to pivot, is to look at my past and to figure out what went right, what went wrong. So you see, sometimes it's true. Sometimes in life, I have to pull an iris. Well, I should say I pull a lot, right? And to pull, because iris didn't do it. To pull a lot means sometimes you just got to say, I'm not looking back. I'm not worrying about the failures. I'm not worrying about the misdeeds, the missteps. All I'm doing is I'm moving myself forward. But you can't do that your entire life. Because connecting with your past is also a very important part, or reconciling with your past is a very important part for future growth. And who taught us how to do that? The Alshich says, Sarah. See, the greatness of Sarah Imenu is she lives this two-ply life almost. On one hand, like the Alshich said, quoting the Zohar on an esoteric level, her life is about rectifying the sin of Chava. And if we kind of de-esoterize that a little bit, right, what that means is Sarah Imenu was a person who was consciously aware and always working on rectifying the mistakes of the past. But at the same time, she never allowed the rectification of the past to derail her dynamic activity in building a future. That's what it means to be a successful person in this world. Kulan shavin l'tova. To be the kind of person who looks in the rearview mirror. What happened? What went wrong? What went right? How could I replicate the stuff that went right? How could I avoid the stuff that went wrong? And what could I learn from the things that went wrong so that I could lead a better life going forward? And at the same time, filled with excitement, optimism, hope, and joy for what the future has in store for me. It's two different models of living, and they're both correct. The iris model is the model that teaches us that sometimes when I need to move myself forward, and sometimes the past is too difficult, too painful, or too overwhelming to deal with, sometimes you just got to let it go and move yourself forward. Let the failures go. That works at times. That sometimes is like a band-aid to move yourself forward in life. But if you want to be successful, I need to lead a Sarah Imenu life. And to lead a Sarah Imenu life, Shnei Chayei Sarah, Kulan Shavin L'Tova. What does it mean they're all good? A Sarah Imenu life is a life where I'm able to be conscious and aware of my past. And again, one more time, what that means is to identify the things that went right so I could replicate them, and to find the courage to identify the things that really have gone wrong. To figure out why did they go wrong? How did they go wrong? And what could I learn about myself and about life from those missteps and misdeeds? But at the same time, while I'm learning from my past, I have to at the same time be building a beautiful, dynamic, and incredible future. Learn from the past, grow from the past, atone for the past, but simultaneously build something beautiful for yourself in the future. Sometimes you have to be an iris, sometimes you have to be a lot. That's episodic. And episodically, I have to behave like that. But the goal ultimately, again, is to try to become a Sarah Imenu. And it's incredible because although to kind of bring it full circle, it's true. The Torah Kedosha doesn't tell us all that much about Sarah, which is really pretty amazing to think about it. The first of the matriarchs, do we know her? Do we really know her? So the truth is, it depends how you define knowing someone. If you define knowing someone by knowing about their childhood, who their parents were, how they grew up, where they lived, then the truth is we know very little about Sarei Menu. But if you define knowing someone by knowing their essence, knowing their midos, then the Torah tells us everything we need to know about Sarei Menu. Shnei Chayei Sarah, Kulan Shavin L'Tova. We should be Zochem Yirtz Hashem, to build a life like the first of the Imos. Again, to find the courage to confront and tackle our past in an effort to learn and to grow from it. But to never get so consumed by the past that I give up and I can't move myself forward. Learn from the past, grow from the past, but at the same time, put in significant effort to build a beautiful future. We'll stop over here for tonight. In Miras Hashem, next week, we're gonna segue from some of these lessons in Miras Hashem into chapter 83, Miras Hashem in Tehillim. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.